get started if I can, please. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Richard Linnehan, who is the United States astronaut currently on assignment to Texas A&M University's Department of Research via NASA Interagency Personal Agreement. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of New Hampshire in Animal Science and Microbiology in 1980, and his DVM degree from the Ohio State University College of Veterinary Medicine in 1985. He was later accepted to a 2-year internship residency in exotic animal medicine and comparative pathology at the Baltimore Zoo and the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. After completing his internship, Dr. Linnehan served as clinical veterinarian for the U.S. Navy's Marine Mammal Program, initiating research in dolphins and pinnipeds, anesthesia, orthopedics, drug pharmacokinetics, and reproduction in direct support of the U.S. Navy Mobile Marine Mammal System stationed in California, Florida, and Hawaii. He was selected as astronaut training by NASA in March of 1992 and is a veteran of 4 space shuttle missions, logging over 58 days in space, including 6 spacewalks totaling 42 hours and 11 minutes. In 2009, he received his master's in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government in Boston, Massachusetts. Dr. Linnehan is currently on the 2nd year of a 2-year intergovernmental personal agreement between NASA and the Vice Chancellor's Office of Strategic Initiatives at Texas A&M University System in College Station, Texas, serving as the Director of Space Science Policy and Education. Please welcome Dr. Linnehan.
Okay, it works. Good. Well, the caveat that I'm now back at NASA, I just finished the IPA at Texas A&M, and I've been back at NASA at Johnson Space Center for about a month and a half now. The rest holds. I want to thank you all for coming this morning, and I have to tell you up front, I just got back from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia about 2 days ago, so I'm about 9 hours lagged up. So if I start doing some weird stuff, anybody in the front row has a cabbage or something, throw it at me, hit me, and plate me back up again. This morning, what I'd like to do is just talk a bit about what my interests are, why I'm here, why you might want me here, and why I feel like I'm qualified for the job of Dean at University of Florida's College of Veterinary Medicine. I wanted to show you that just because it gives you an idea maybe where I'm coming from and what I'm interested in. After flying the 4 times and with my background in exotic animal medicine and marine, I've always been interested in water, coastal interfaces, and what happens there. 85–90% of the world's population live within about 100 miles of the coast. The University of Florida is an amazing place because although we're not coastal, we live in a giant laboratory which is called Florida. My main interest after the space flights and after being able to look down and see the Earth like that, I've gone to the One Health initiative. I'm really about One Health and interconnectedness. So my backgrounds, we'll talk a little bit about it. Dana just read my bio from the time I graduated vet school. Why I'm interested, we'll talk about, and following my long view for the College of Veterinary Medicine in general, where I see it going. So, I've been told that I am non-traditional. I've been told, I've been asked, what is a veterinarian? Why is a veterinarian an astronaut? Why is an astronaut a veterinarian? And I always thought it would be the most logical thing as I was going through vet school to want to do this. But I could be considered outside the box. I'm not your typical academic candidate. I have some skills in other areas, and I'm admittedly probably weak in some other areas that I need to come up to speed on if I was your dean. Background, as I said, born New Englander, 1980s, Bachelor of Science to Ohio State, then into private practice for a year onto a residency, and then very cool job as the Chief Clinical Veterinarian for the Navy's Marine Mammal Program in San Ridgeway. Pretty much, that's what I wanted to do when I became a veterinarian. When I went to vet school, I had in my head, and Mike Walsh is here in the audience, they'll always tell you, it's like, you'll never do that, it's impossible, you can't do it, you won't get in, you'll just be a marine mammal veterinarian. And if you keep your head down, you're a little bit stubborn, and you persevere, you can do it. And so I did that with San Ridgeway for about 4 years, and at the end of that I decided, well, what do I want to do now? Do I go back to the zoo? Do I go back to private practice? Well, I always wanted to be a pilot or a veterinarian, and how could I combine both? And sometimes it's okay not to grow up, because I remember when I was 12 and watched them walk in the moon, I stood up in my yard and I go, I want to do this someday. And so my thinking was, hey, what profession is better trained all around than a veterinarian to work in the biomedical side of the house? And as it turns out, veterinarians have been involved in the space program. This isn't a veterinarian, but I put this in to highlight creativity and what gives that spark. Now, a lot of you are old enough in here to even recognize this, but this is an old show I watched when I was a kid called Fireball XL5. And it got me interested in space and science. I mean, it's the little things, the dumb things that turn a spark on a 5 or 6 year old. And part of what we're doing as veterinarians is mentorship. That's a major part of what we need to be doing more of, actually, and what we're doing now. So, I dreamed about it, and it got me on my way, interested in science and eventually veterinary medicine. I didn't get the cool uniform and plastic robot or the lawn, but I did get to follow in the footsteps of these guys, the original 7. And I was lucky enough to meet John, Glenn, all these guys, and actually got to meet Neil Armstrong a few months before he died. So we talked about veterinarians. Well, why does a veterinarian want to be an astronaut? What would interest them? Well, the first American astronauts and Russian cosmonauts weren't even human, right? Here's a picture of Han and Light on the Russian side. And veterinarians were instrumental and very, very active in the early space program in terms of taking care of the animals and actually helping train them for the suborbital flights for Shepard. And of course, we graduated on to the space program. Veterinarians are back again, although I'm the only one. They may not take another one after me. But through Project Mercury, up through Apollo, into the space shuttle program, which just ended last year, veterinarians played a significant role. If it wasn't for veterinarians, you could argue that we wouldn't have a space program. And of course, as you become an astronaut and you're a veterinarian and an astronaut, most of my first flights were biomedical. My first 2 flights were space lab flights on the Space Shuttle Columbia. And the second flight was called Neurolab. We had about 2,000 life forms on board. About 1,500 of them were crickets. We were doing neurological experiments. It was probably the most intense life sciences biomedical flight ever flown by NASA and NIH peer reviewed. We got some really good data from it. But people ask, well, what did you do experiments on? And I said, well, mainly did experiments on 4 large primates. And I was one of them. Muscle biopsies, indwelling catheters, all kinds of cool stuff. But my overarching interests and goals for the University of Florida School of Veterinary Medicine are One Health. Now you're going to have to excuse me a little bit on the sci-fi kind of geek, and so I kind of related things to old sci-fi movies and maybe pick up cues here in terms of some of the text and how I say it. But the evolution of the veterinary profession as leaders and policymakers is happening, and I think it's part of what's going to happen to our profession. It needs to happen. One Health initiatives, it's the new buzzword. How do you define One Health? What's the nomenclature? Well, ecosystems health, it's conservation medicine, it's One Health. The terminology, it's always been there, but the terminology is now right into the One Health initiative, which means protection and restoration. I always have a little bit of a problem when we talk about One Health, because it's like, is it animal health, is it public health, is it about people? And I always come back to it, it's just health. Everything is interconnected, even our professions. Which is why I think this whole area, the SHANs, the centers here, is such a unique area, because you've got so many professional schools all grouped together, and the possibilities for cross-pollination and research are something that can't be accomplished at a lot of other facilities. So as the ABMA describes One Health, it's a collaborative effort of multiple disciplines. We talked about working locally, nationally, globally to attain optimal health for people, animal, and environments. Basically, we become doctors of the biosphere. So I think the roles for veterinarians as we progress into this new millennium is going to be one of layering new jobs on existing ones. The classical veterinary medicine is what brought us here. It's important. It will always exist, but we're going to have to all become more than we were. This is a picture of Billy Koresh, veterinarian for Bronx. He's done a lot of other work in One Health, and he pretty much spent most of his life in the field. But what is the role of a veterinarian? Well, they're all listed here. You have classical, everything that's recognized as classical. But there's so much more out there that we can do. And we need to think about our profession expanding, kind of a diaspora in different areas we normally maybe haven't thought about. And we talked a little bit this morning with some people about possibilities happening now. I mean, biosecurity, food security, different areas of aquatic agriculture, clinical pathology, environmental toxicology. It's a natural for veterinarians to be environmental toxicologists. No one's better cross-trained. Eventually, people all come back to veterinarians to ask the hard questions. I know many of you, if you're in practice, you've been asked, but one of the first things that happens when I got out of vet school was people came to me. I mean, what is this? Zoonotic diseases, people couldn't diagnose it, and you end up diagnosing it for doctors. It's happened in several cases. So regardless if you want to be an expert or don't want to be an expert, or you want to just be small animal, large animal, you are going to be looked at as someone who knows more than the average health profession about everything. And we need to expand on that. And so these are the places right now, a few of the places at least, that are actively involved in that. Since I started school, since Mike and several other people, my contemporaries in school, there's been a number of programs that have come into being. There's AquaVet, EnviroVet, which has gone down and come back again, conservation medicine facilities, wildlife trust. People are understanding that it's important to protect the biosphere and biodiversity on the planet because ultimately it's going to affect us. There are other reasons also for looking at One Health initiative in veterinary medicine and expanding the profession. There are national security reasons. And veterinarians, again, are better poised than almost any other health profession to be involved in that. Health diplomacy, using health diplomacy for national security, sustainable agriculture. And now when I talk about agriculture, it's almost, I think of agriculture and aquaculture almost synonymously. We produce terrestrial food, we have to produce protein sources from the water, it's all there, and we're already involved in that. Some of the publications that look at that right now in different organizations that are involved in conservation and health diplomacy. When I was in school, one of the things I wanted to do, unbelievably, when I got out, was join the Peace Corps and go work as a veterinarian. And unbelievably, when I talked to them, they did not have any spots per se for veterinarians. I want to use my veterinary degree. I want to do this, and this in public health and animal health. Well, you can join the Peace Corps and you can work, but you're not going to work as a veterinarian. And so one of those things is we need to change that. We need to be more actively involved. And in other roles, we talked a bit about soft power, using it as a way to maintain security and peace throughout regions, different regions of the world, because it is a global proposition, novel technologies, and finally, how are we going to be stewards of the environment and be managers of ecosystems? Typical ecosystem services as they're grouped in this nebulous diagram all function on provisioning, regulating the cultural and supporting aspects of health. And you can see health is at the center. It all comes down to group health, the gestalt, the earth, in terms of One Health. So these are just 3 slides I put in here. They're overlays, I'll go through them fast, but you can see the large marine ecosystems of the world. Of course, the marine, the coastal, and then ecosystem imbalance ranked by country, not company, country. And you can look at the color charts there, and then remember that last chart, the marine systems, and then look at where imminent species degradation threats are, extinctions are coming up, and pretty much it's at the coastal interface everywhere, on all the major continents. And everything runs downhill, so everything that happens inland will eventually happen at the coast, will affect the coast, will affect our food production, will affect water quality, everything that we need to be healthy is affected. So how do we bring all this together in terms of linkages? There's a program called HEAL. Unfortunately, some of the slide is cut off. You can't see the base of it, but there's a gentleman named Jeff Osofsky, who's a veterinarian who who runs this program in DC, and it's looking just at that, as it says, the linkages between integrated public health and environmental conservation initiatives, and how you can work with the local ecosystems and try not to change them. Keep them the way they are to sustain the balance that was there before we impacted them. Again, another kind of nebulous diagram, but I like it because it shows the interaction between all aspects of society. So sometimes we sequester ourselves or silo ourselves into like, I do this, and yeah, we're related, but I do this. Well, veterinary medicine, I think, should expand beyond that and understand that maybe core curriculum changes. Maybe we start getting more classes in economics and IT and political theory, different things that maybe we're not classically taught, but that we're going to need as tools in this changing world, the economic world and the political world as we move into this century. And of course, the triumvirate, how they intersect, where we are, and how it involves ecosystems. Our ecosystems touch on every other part of our society. And then a big thing, and one of your centers for emergent diseases, which is very important to me, very work, are what is happening in the world right now. Well, we're experiencing a re-emergence of diseases we thought were gone, and we're experiencing new diseases that we hadn't expected, and we can probably expect more. We're going to need to address those and study them further. But most of the emergent diseases that we see now are zoonotics. They're correlated with socioeconomic, environmental, ecological factors, are related to One Health. And as I said, going in to clean up the situation isn't as simple as, well, there's an epidemic of malaria or whatever. We're going to go in and we're going to throw a bunch of drugs at it. We cleared it up, it's done. Oh, by the way, there's an insect, but there's a socioeconomic part, there's a cultural part, there's training, there's education, all of it comes together. And we have to understand that, and we have to understand the whole algorithm, because when we leave, we haven't done much good if we don't. So vector-borne zoonotic diseases, we all know them. As I said, they're coming back. SARS, West Nile, dengue, Hanta, Hendra. These things, maybe I should have heard about them when I was in vet school, but I didn't. But they're sure up there now, and they're becoming a big problem, big issues. And then finally, something we don't want to think about, but something that has happened and is probably going to happen, and that we need to be prepared for. And as veterinarians, again, I think our profession is more prepared than anybody and better trained cross-specifically to be able to deal with this when and if it happens, which is bioterrorism and biosecurity, weaponization of agents. Finally, another project that I've been involved with that is going on in Texas A&M right now, which probably a lot of you have heard about, the Gulf Restore Act that came out of the McConville Deepwater Horizon blow-up with BP funding. And it's a project with Texas A&M, the Hart Institute, and maybe other places on the Gulf Coast in cooperation with a university in the UK called Swansea that has developed some pretty amazing chemical accelerometer and depth type gauging that can be instrumented on basically anything, from birds to fish to mammals, and turn them into mobile microbial and chemical platforms to monitor the ocean health in the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, unfortunately this is cut off just a bit, but anyway, the mission is to do this in a unique effect. This is for Rory Wilson. And then some facts in the Gulf of Mexico, which many of you know. Last someone told me that, why is it important to protect the Gulf? Well, quality of life, well-being, and health, but it's a huge economic concern. Florida probably has a little bit under 700 miles of Gulf coastline, and also this will affect the Atlantic too, but the Gulf Coast is a big part of it. Florida is involved in funding with BP, and I think each state will get around $85 million over 10 years or so to budget out and develop One Health projects in ways to bring the Gulf back. And then this is the mission statement. We talked about it a bit, to extract the history hidden in the bodies of the water and the integration of the system with environmental monitoring programs programs, satellite technology, real-time download, basically giving the Gulf of Mexico a nervous system, real-time nervous system. And then a picture of the Macondo or Deepwater Horizon blowout. I remember when this happened, I was in Houston and flying back and forth over it for a number of weeks. It was not pretty. You know, you keep hearing about how the oil has disappeared magically and it's gone and not a problem anymore, and the dispersants ate it all up and everything's okay. Well, I don't necessarily think that's true, and there's going to be a lot of repercussions in the next coming decade with that oil, where it is and where it's done, as the pyramid starts to collapse. So how do we do this? Well, we talk about different ways of monitoring from space, satellite-borne. We can use the Argos and other satellites to help us, in addition to looking at Earth-borne geophysical observations from space, correlating with the data we receive from the Gulf of Mexico project. But inherently, we turn each animal into a sensory net that will be interconnected and dumped into a cloud database. And we can look at signature microbiomes, nanoparticles, depth, accelerometers, movement of animals. And we can learn from the top predators, but everything the top predators do focuses down the pyramid. And we can learn a lot about what we don't have instrumented also, in terms of their food sources and what's going on in the Gulf, and how these systems are being upset. So accelerometry, you can see the device down below here. It's very small. It's, okay, well, here it is. There we go. Very small, and it can basically be plugged into any animal. It's a question of figuring out capture methods and how you want to get a hold of them to instrument them. And you can see right here that we've got one on shark and different species that we use it on. So it isn't just the Gulf of Mexico initiative. It starts here, but we can go anywhere in the world. We're talking with the North Slope Borough Department of Wildlife Management now. Imagine getting real-time data on sperms and deep diving mammals. It's applicable to any top predator. And this gives you a good idea. Different species, avian, marine mammal, fish, but all been instrumented in a good track for the whole Gulf of Mexico. And you can see complex analysis of movement via accelerometry. There's a whole lore of information to be mined and used with Restore Act funding. Okay, well, when you look down from space, as I talked about, it's a different view. I mean, you talk about, everyone talks about, the 100,000 foot view, big view, the bird's eye view. What about the view from 100 nautical miles or 250 nautical miles? Excuse me. Well, when you're up there, you realize what a finite place the Earth is, that the resources are not, infinite, they're limited. The atmosphere is just this thin skin around the planet. It's very easily damaged, and the way to study this is sometimes put human eyes in space because you get a different vantage point. It's easy to talk about things when you're on the planet and you're looking back down different. So observations from space will be part of any kind of environmental monitoring program in One Health. Much of what we've learned from satellite technology and spacecraft in terms of shuttle program, reverse observations, is helped in all these different areas to directly benefit society. Overview of human use of land and vegetation as it's changed over the years and where we're headed. You can see that the forest area has declined by quite a bit in the last 100 years, and the desertification of the globe has been increasing. And now, regardless of if you believe that, you hear the climate change, global warming, if you believe that it's natural global cycling, weather pattern cycling over eons, if it's man-made, or if it's somewhere in between, it is happening. No question about that, the data is there. So what can we do and how will it affect us? Well, I mean, everything is interconnected. Everything is interconnected. There's a great book by Malcolm Gladwell, a year called Tipping Point. And, everything, it's not just additive and subtraction, it's multiplicative, it's logarithmic. Reach a certain point, just go a little bit past it, and it's implosion. Everything's on a fine line, balanced. Everything is balanced. And we don't understand that balance yet, and it's going to be a long time before we do. And we'd be pretty arrogant to think that we understand everything. And we are really at childhood's end here in terms of where we are as a profession, coming in and trying to be the vanguard movement in health professions to understand this and get a better handle on how things are happening and how it's going to affect human health, and again, the whole One Health initiative. So, major greenhouse gases, we hear about CO2, we hear, we have pollution. We all know that, food lot production is a major methane producer. What do we do as a profession? Do we just kind of ignore it? And, it's business as usual, or what can we do? How do we fix it? What are we going to do, and where are we going to go with food production, protein production? Is it going to be land-based terrestrial? Is it going to be large feedlots? Are we going to change how we eat as a species? Are we going to look at other protein sources? For instance, believe it or not, insects. No one wants to eat insects, but feed body weight conversion, it's almost 1-to-1. It's amazing what you can get, and many cultures do. As populations change, as things change, as climate and resources change, it may be that we change our preferences in food. But anyway, this gives you an idea of the amount of carbon dioxide and what it's done over the years in terms of what we call global warming. Understand that with global warming, that doesn't mean the globe is getting warm. Overall, maybe a 2 centigrade change in the next couple hundred years, but there's going to be a lot of places that get a lot colder. Conservation of energy, colder and hotter. I think maybe people have noticed that. But what we do have to worry about is acidification of the oceans. It can't be business as usual. The oceans are at a tipping point. They can't absorb much more CO2. And you can see that already they've been falling for a while, and it's a precipitous area that we're heading into. And what's happening is coral bleaching, changes. We don't really know what's happening. Other than the overt things we can see, such as coral. What's happening to the krill? What's happening to the phytoplankton, algae? How is the pH affecting them? We're talking about organisms that have lived for millions of years at a certain set point. And in a geologic blip, we've changed it. And humans have been part of that. Now, there is cyclical, no question about it, cyclical fluctuations. But if you look at the amount of CO2 put back into the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution, you can see that for 650,000 years it never been above until the Industrial Revolution hit. And this is just a joke back to the Cretaceous, because that's about where they were back then. And talk about what's going to happen with food pyramids and stuff already in Japan. Major fisheries are declining. They're looking, going back, they're finding most of their catches is large selenites, jellyfish. So we may be back to eating, we may have to get a taste for jellyfish and other lower life forms, because they're the ones that are going to survive and thrive in this situation if it continues. Then overall global temperatures are increasing. You can see we're in one of the hotter zones right now, the Atlantic, but they have been climbing. And then the thermohaline circulation, basically the circulation of blood of our planet is being disrupted by CO2 because of the imbalances in the heat dissipation in the atmosphere. When that happens, the thermohaline circulation will change concentrations in certain areas, the salt water change, and we alter the patterns. And so when we're talking about altering the patterns of the Gulf Stream and increasing El Nino and El Nino events, things of that nature, then you get a general understanding that we do have some type of impact, and we have to be concerned about this. Good picture, this is a shuttle-based picture that just goes to show what's happening in Greenland. If any of you have been paying attention, the ice sheets are calving massive amounts right now, and we're losing a lot of the polar ice. Subsequently, we have environments, they call them 3 sigma environments and populations. Again, these animals have developed in these areas, and they're on the edge. Go just a little in either direction, and their niches are gone. What happens to them? Well, we saw that picture before about massive extinctions. Some animals can maintain themselves in a wider band, but these animals at the poles and extreme environments are really in a low curve. And they're forming function in extreme ecological niches. This is just a great picture of a bowhead. This is actually a picture of a scan. Dr. Hillman at Louisiana State, believe it or not, has bowhead fetuses frozen. And we actually took one of these up to Texas A&M and scanned it on the MRI and got a great picture of it. Then United States Geological Survey. This is what they're predicting because of the ice melting, and polar bears are in trouble. And one of the species that are going to be overtly affected right away, we'll see charismatic megavertebrate. So what happens to the biodiversity on our planet with all these changes? And how do we help as environmental stewards? What can we do? Well, how do you define biodiversity? That's kind of nebulous in and of itself, but this is a pretty good explanation of what biodiversity is. And what are the impacts of changing biodiversity? It doesn't matter. Should we care that species are going out? I mean, really, does it affect us in our lives on a daily basis? Probably not. We don't think it does, at least. But long term, what's it going to do to the planet? What's it going to do for the generations to come? And what's it going to do for our general health and well-being? And again, as veterinarians, we're not just about ourselves or our species. We're multi-species. We should care. So obviously, we go through all the eons and periods, but we're right now in the Phanerozoic, and you can see how biodiversity is increasing. Right up to the point where we are now in the Miocene, and we're slowly driving in the other direction, which is not a good thing. Now this is an older chart, 2000. They don't have insects on here, interestingly enough, but I think insects are still doing okay. They may inherit, but you can see the extinction of the threatened species percentage on a global scale, where we're going. So what else will veterinarians do? Okay, so I told you I'm a little bit of a sci-fi geek here, but I have this giant dream about veterinarians. It's like someday, if you look at demographics, the first planetary exobiologist, someday someone's going to step off a spacecraft from another planet. Could be in our solar system, could be Titan, could be Enceladus, or Europa. There may be life on moons in our own solar system. We don't know. Maybe even Mars. But if you look at demographics, they're probably going to be sheep, and she steps off. But what will happen? And how are we better suited to study life than from work or than any other profession? Well, I think we are. Now, I know you've been paying attention to the recent Curiosity rover. It's a good picture of the sky crane and placement. It's up there right now, trying to do its best to see if there was water, there was life on Mars. I'm betting there was. There's all kinds of theories about what happened to Mars in terms of planetary impacts it could have on us. That at one point Mars had an atmosphere and water, and it took a big hit, and this is what's left. And the same could happen to us at some point. So there's one selfish reason to learn how to travel in space is that someday we may need to leave. What about other planets in our solar system? I mean, as veterinarians, we may be involved in this someday. And it's far-fetched, it's like I'm a small animal practitioner or I'm a large animal practitioner. Well, if we expand our profession out and we look at new talent and we go boldly go where no one has gone before, right? From Star Trek, but we are well suited as environmental toxicologists, as people trained in a cross variety of species, to be one of these people. So, for instance, the top picture up here on the that is Titan, Enceladus, and this is a picture of Europa. And you can see that there's a mile-thick layer of ice on Europa. It's a Jovian moon. Sunlight doesn't get there, but we all know about chemosynthetic organisms. And they actually are looking at now temperature-wise. They think that the oceans on Europa may actually be close to the temperature of what we're experiencing right now. We're in this room. So the temperature and energy involved in the geophysical shifts of the planet from the gravitational pull of Jupiter actually are making heat for the planet. So why can't something survive? Why can't something live? We all know about the tube worms and giant worms and vents. They don't function on photosynthesis, chemosynthesis. There are other forms of life, there are other ways to use natural resources. You don't necessarily need to be carbon or water-based. And if we get really out there, what about other planets? Well, if any of you are involved in cosmology or interested, you'll know that they recently discovered the Gliese system and the Kepler system. Planets that are very similar to Earth, I think. So the question becomes, is there life out there? Are there other planets out there? It's almost astronomically impossible, even in our own galaxy, that there won't be. It's a question of distances and where we are and how we're training when we get there. But it will happen. Okay, so you got to be expendable, right? This is all going to happen, but veterinarians are going to be on the forefront, and there's got to be some things that happen. If you're a Star Trek fan, you basically just don't want to be a guy in a red shirt, right? Someone's not going to come back. But it's all in the name of science, right? And so, not to be a little facetious, but not so much different, this is what we're faced with now in public health. It isn't just organisms, it isn't just disease, it's nuclear fallout, it's tsunamis, it's public health, it's water quality, water rights, it's emerging pathogens, it's politics, it's diseases that we as veterinarians are very familiar with that are re-emerging, like rabies and babesiosis and Lyme disease, and how they affect us as humans and how they reflect back on other organisms on the planet. And unfortunately, I have a LinkedIn file there that doesn't show up now. I think we're a little blip in that. Nope. Let's see if I can make it play. Well, too bad. That was my classic good Bones McCoy kind of thing. So I don't know if any of you are Star Trek fans, but the classic thing was, what am I, a doctor or escalator? What am I, a doctor or a bricklayer? Well, what you are going to be is you're going to be a doctor of many skills. And veterinarians will have to become that. They'll be treating diseases, they'll be treating public health issues. They'll be involved in a lot of areas that they are involved in now, but they'll be later. There'll be more and more responsibility as time goes on. And, I put this in just because I wanted to. We have bad days, we have bad weeks. Sometimes everything just, the week just basically sucks. And you're like, man. But, things are bad. How do I get through this? And I have this in as a little astrophysical zen for you. Give you a general idea of, not that our problems don't matter, but it's a way to kind of like get past it and keep driving in terms of what you need to get accomplished. Because little things get to me sometimes. But when I've been in space and started looking at this and looked down and someone sent me this, I started looking at relative size and how important everything seems to us. But when we blow it up from scale, here's the Earth, here's our planets. Here's Jupiter, there are orbiting moons, here's the Earth. Here's our sun, here's Jupiter, there's the Earth. There's our sun, Pollux, Arcturus. Here's Arcturus. These are just stars, systems in our own galaxy. Orders of magnitude difference. So it's not that we're insignificant, because we're all significant, but there's a whole lot of stuff out there that we don't know anything about yet. And we're just at the edge. And it's easy to get wrapped up in issues and problems down here, when in fact what we need to be doing is collaborating and driving ahead, because that's how best to positively spend our energy. Now, I love this picture just because it illustrates what we just talked about. But we were just in our galaxy, Gliese, Arcturus, Pollux, all the stars. And I put this up for kids when I talk to them. If all of you will hold your thumbs up, just hold your thumbs up in front of you. Look at your thumbnail. Take about half of that thumbnail and point it up at the sky in the space ball. That big in an area where there's nothing. No stars, nothing but blackness. They point at the Hubble Space Telescope. And they argued for months about whether they should spend the time to do this or not. Finally, they said, look, we'll do a 12-day exposure. So in an area where nothing is, when we're in the Milky Way galaxy looking out, this is looking back in the space of your thumb. stars in one galaxy. Do the math, step down. 1% of those has stars that can sustain planets like us. 1% of those has habitable planets. 1% of those has life on it. You're still talking about astronomical numbers of planets with life. Now, in the space of your thumb, you're looking at how many stars do you think? How many? I'm going to guess. I can do this as a trick question. There's only 3 stars in the picture. There's one obvious one. There's, I believe, I was told, this one is my astrophysics friends, and there's one right here. Everything else you're looking at is a galaxy. 6,000 galaxies in less than your thumbnail. Do the math. So the question becomes when I'm asked, well, do you think there's life out there? Well, do you think there isn't? It's astronomically impossible to me that there would be. So anyway, I digress. I'm here to talk more about college readiness. You can see I'm very much interested in One Health and the overarching principles about where a profession is going to go and what it can do. The potential we have is unlimited, especially in a situation like this at UFL with the Shands Institute, with all our collaboratory professional institutions. It's amazing. So beyond the horizon, the near and future challenges. So we're all of a new health profession, aren't we? I mean, less than 200 years. I mean, we've been around for a long time, but recognized by the Morrill Act and the State of Agriculture back in the late 1800s. So, but where are we going to go? So, yeah, it's child exempt for our profession. We need to expand. We need to think of ourselves in new ways and different ways. And how we perceive ourselves reflects back on how we're perceived by other professions. And maybe it's limited us in terms of where we want to go. So I talked about the interconnectedness of things. We're all veterinarians. We all have our different expertise areas, but we're all connected. We all have to be more connected, and we have to be more involved, especially in training new students and recruiting new people for veterinary school. Because classically, it's not going to be completely sustainable to keep the model of veterinary medicine going that we have. We already have budget pressures. The problems for large animal veterinarians, even small animals, veterinary income is climbing, but it's tapering. Where we bought $20 billion, a little over $20 billion last year for direct veterinary costs, around $50 billion or a little bit less for the whole pet industry. That's going to continue to climb, but we're going to produce more and more. We have to find new markets. We have to find new areas. One Health is an excellent way to do that. What we talked about, decreased state funding, redoubling efforts. I believe that we should be actively involved in media, in public campaigns to let people understand what veterinarians do, why we're important. Everything we do, all the jobs we do in public health, food security, food production, it's not just taking care of your pets or your horses and cows, which most people still think veterinarians do. And we ourselves haven't been the best at getting that message out. We need to start doing that better and placing key talented veterinarians in regulatory jobs and major agencies involved in One Health and health aspects in our country at the state and federal levels, EPA, FDA, USDA. Eventually, they come back to us and want to know, how come this is the way it is? Well, why not we there and just do it and tell them? Because everyone comes back, and everyone will come back eventually and ask you if it's a zoonosis. They don't understand. Well, veterinarians do. New roles will be overlaid, progressive, and the contemporary issues that we face right now. So yeah, increasing contract, grant revenue, and private donations. We're going to have to do that. We're going to have to be active that way. You guys have been very successful. I mean, the facility we have here, the small animal hospital is amazing. I mean, I want to be treated there if I get sick. But it takes private donations, it takes getting people educated and involved about veterinary medicine. There are always going to be people passionate about their animals and pets, but we need to get out there and we need to educate the public. People who, that they don't, it's not that they don't care, they don't know. And if they don't know, they don't care. So research is both an academic activity and an enterprise. We need to be looking more at corporate partnerships, private corporate partnerships. The days of NIH, National Science Foundation, keeping institutions afloat academically in labs are gone. There's no money anymore. We have to be creative. We have to expand out that way too. We had also talked about this about curriculum. I think we need to take a hard look at the professional curriculum and how it's structured and how it's spread out over a 4-year period. And we also need to be thinking, when we recruit new students, and say, maybe it's time for dual degrees. You know, a professional degree is great, but why not get a master's in Home Health? Why not get a master's in health? Why not go and get a PhD? Why don't we create cross-pollinating programs between all the professional schools here, where we have facilities and talent to do that, and really start looking for kids at the grade school level, the secondary school level, that we can bring in and get interested in science, become researchers, clinical clinicians, researchers, scientists, as veterinarians. And of course, supporting the faculty. I mean, we're going to be generating new faculty by doing this. There's nothing more important than having talented faculty members. I mean, everyone will think back, well, you're still in school, but I can think back, many of you are, to you know, the key people I had in vet school and in college, who, if I hadn't had them, if they hadn't been there, hadn't been passionate and cared about me, you know, I wouldn't have made it through school, or I wouldn't have been doing what I'm doing right now. And we kind of lose that whole aspect of mentoring and how important it is, the one-on-one, to hire the really talented people, the people who are passionate and retain them. And we have to treat our people well. We have to figure out a way to compensate merit better than we have. And then, of course, the big thing, keeping the cost of very professional education down. I mean, how do you do that? What are your ways? Maybe novel ways with state funding and payback, new ways to cancel debt. We have to look at everything at a political level, at an education level. We have to tighten our belts. We have to be more efficient. Yeah, those are all the buzzwords. But we have to figure out where we can get more funding, how we can get help. The only way we can do that is to educate everybody at the higher levels about how important we are and why we need to help us. And I don't think we do that as well as we should. Finally, I threw this slide in just because it's really important. We talk about mentoring. Many of you are involved maybe in high schools, elementary schools. Nothing more important. If we want people in the veterinary profession, like we talked about, well, we better start recruiting them and training them now. We better identify them. We better give them access to science, to what we do, and train them and let them see where they could go as veterinarians or as scientists. So nothing is more important than STEM education and initiatives. And they can be at the elementary school level. I just did a grant for DARPA, and we're actually training pre-K through K through 3-year-old, excuse me, 3 up to K, in AI-based. They're actually carrying around tablets that actually are AI-based, and they talk to the tablets, and they learn from the tablets, and tablets learn from them. I call it the Great Gazoo. Remember that? Probably too young. Fred Flintstone. That's what it reminds me of. But new methods, new IT technology, new ways of teaching, distance learning. Why do you have to be in class? I mean, if someone needs to be on the other side of the globe and they're a veterinary student, why can't they watch the lecture? Or why can't, I mean, not all the time, but we ought to be able, we're a global society, we ought to be keeping pace with that, and actually one step above that in terms of our IT technology and how we use that to train veterinarians and teach. And then finally, just a good quote from Margaret Mead. I think I talked a little bit longer than I'm supposed to, but I'll be happy to answer any questions if I can. And depending on how people are doing for time, if you're interested, and you may not have the time, I'm no virtual. I bought a small video clip that recently got put together by NASA that shows a lot of space shuttle footage, is about 7 or 8 minutes. I can play that or not play it. But it's stuff that I never saw before, that people have never seen in terms of launch sequences and payloads. So we can do that, but first I think the most important is questions. Anybody? Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, you've done a nice job of presenting the things you presented. I'm curious, I'm retired, so I'm not here. But I'm curious as to your administrative philosophy, how you function as an administrator, delegator, micromanipulator, or
Definitely not a micromanipulator. Okay, I spent 20 years in the federal bureaucracy with NASA. Okay, and I was military before that. And what I learned is that it's important to be a consensus builder. What I found at NASA is the last thing in the world you need for a group, harmony in a group, and people to get along efficiently and work together is some kind of top-down, ivory-tower management, where we don't talk to you, we just do what we tell you. And I've been living that, and I'm allergic to it. So I have administrative experience. The degree at Harvard taught me a lot, but during my time in the office, I've been branch chief and chief of exploration initiatives. I worked at KSC and launch ops, where I was involved in shuttle operations and launching. That's $1 billion a pop, and I had about 200 people under me. I've got experience on the governmental side, and again, I'm not your typical, I'm obviously not your academic. I've been involved with academics as a consultant on and off, but I've been disassociated with that. But I will say that there are discrete similarities between the federal government and academic administrative systems, and that I do understand that it's very important that you take care of your people, you foster the good people, you promote them, and you function from a consensus bottom up, where you gain the trust and cooperation, and you have an open dialogue where people can discuss the problem, come to a consensus, make a decision, and every so often, as a leader, you have to make a decision that maybe isn't always that popular, but it's always for the best, the greater good of the whole. And I think sometimes we lose that. But that's where I am. I'm definitely not a federal bureaucrat. One of the things I like about being at A&M, Texas A&M, were although there are similarities between the systems, there are also checks and balances that I thought, at least at the university level, and the chancellor system and the board of regents, and also faculty senate, where you could have more of a voice and people could be heard and you could work out things. That's where I'm at. Anybody? Was I that bad? Yes, ma'am.
We are starting a process of just inventorying our curriculum. And you touched on that a little bit in your talk, that you would like to see a revitalized, expanded, relevant curriculum. Could you say a few more things about that? What are veterinary schools doing now that you might consider irrelevant? Or you mentioned more training in technology, but I'd just like to hear a little bit.
Yeah, I can give you my opinion because I haven't been in school in a while, but I've been associated with schools, and I think the classic curriculum in terms of what we expect to get as veterinarians when we go to school hasn't really changed that much since the 1800s. I mean, anatomy, physiology, we get all that basic stuff and we need it, but do we need it the way it's structured now? Does it have to be crammed together in the first 2 years where students don't maybe get any clinical experience? That's the way it was when I was in school. I didn't like it. I mean, we were in class all the time and I'd see the juniors and seniors. It's like, I want to be involved more. I think we need to give students an opportunity to get involved even before veterinary school. If they're accepted, give them opportunities for the summer or beforehand to get involved in research projects that the veterinary school sponsors or that other professional schools in the area in collaboration with the school sponsor. And then we need to look at how to spread the curriculum out, the important core curriculum. That's never going to go away. We need to do that. But think about different ways to mix that in and bring in more clinical and research experience. We talk about this whole cross-pollination thing. Get the students out and let them see what's out there. Rather than cloistered in 2 years of this, okay, it's time for you to go to clinics and, you can have 8 weeks off and you can go do this, but you better hurry back because your large animal clinic starts. And, I'm not saying change or anything. That we have to have schedules, but we have to be more adaptable. We have to let people go where they want to go. And when we do that, we're going to be able to let the profession expand in the areas we haven't before. Now, I've got ideas. We talked about, IT. I mean, how many schools have a hard course in IT technology and communication for veterinary students? Well, I mean, let's face it. If we're going to be global communicators, we're going to diagnose, we better know a lot about IT, machinery, and how it works. Not only diagnostic machinery, but communication technology, everything, because it's part of the whole diagnostic package right now. We don't do that. Political theory. I mean, as dumb as it sounds, game theory, political theory, diplomacy, macroeconomics. How many people were trained in business theory and economics in vet school and get out and have to manage a private practice? I was in private practice for a year. It's like, why didn't they tell me this? You know, I mean, there are things that we can do at a practical level, mixed in and look at the curriculum. And pertaining to my talk, I'm a big One Health advocate. I think we need to push, I think we need to really push the profession in ways of becoming scientists, research clinicians, where we're not just a veterinarian. You can be a large animal, small animal person. You could be a One Health consultant. You could be a large animal clinician who could be a global consultant for giant conglomerates. You could be a small animal clinician who just happens to be, you know, maybe interested in environmental toxicology and have talk experience. But it's a layer. We can't just stay with the old model because the old model is passe and demographics are changing in our profession. And if we don't change with it and we don't change with the times, we're going to find ourselves kind of as a backwater where we're considered, oh, go to the vet, you know, they take care of dogs and cats, don't they? But no, veterinarians, I mean, they're the best environmental toxicologists. They're the best epidemiologists. They're the best people for public health. They're the best people for nutrition across our food production, security, biosecurity, biotech. I mean, there's all these areas that we can expand into that we already are involved with. But people come to us and just ask us for their help when they need us. No, it's like, we need to be in charge of that stuff. And so a lot of that goes along those lines about where we go with curriculum. Anyone else? Maybe you're, yes, ma'am.
So what sort of relationship would you like to establish with New Campus, and how would you see that as benefiting the college and potentially bringing in other partners to team with us?
When you say main campus, are you talking about the serious shams?
Yes, and you know, when they allocate money and they decide who gets cut how much,
Yeah.
what could you put out there? What,
We just had a little talk about that right before I came up here, about the allocations being cut and, you know, how much the medical schools, the 600-pound gorilla, and work on the back there. And I think first and foremost, you have to have a good relationship, good rapport with people who control the money and who understand where you're coming from and why it's important. And again, that goes just go back to education. The people here understand the importance of veterinary medicine, but maybe not as much as they need to. So maybe we talk a little bit more in terms of the cross-pollination programs. I think if we could get that going, or we could actually get professional students between all the schools back and forth, cross-cultural contamination, so to speak, that would go a long way to bolstering, you know, all the professions and actually getting everybody to understand each other a little more and how interconnected really we all are. That'll, I think, truthfully, governmental level, state, and federal, I think we need a blitzkrieg PR. I think we need to have, I mean, it's about NASA, you know, the Marines, you know, all that. We need 30 seconds possible on veterinary medicine. We need to educate people about the history of veterinary medicine, what it's done, all the stuff behind the scenes that no one really knows about. That, you know, luckily we have food, you know, food production. It's all because of veterinary medicine, or it will be, or it can be. And we need to highlight that more. We need to educate people about why we're important and what we do. And I think when we do that, it'll be easier to extract some of that money. But saying that is like a panacea, that will help, but, you know, money's tight all around. It's tough times. So we also have to be smart about how we do new research grants and funding. Maybe look at partnerships that we talk about with corporate organizations who can come in, you know, Waltham, I mean, other big companies like that. And also, on the governmental side of the house, look at DARPA, BARDA, Joint Defense Terrorist Threat Reduction Agency, EPA, there's money there, Homeland Security. And as I talk about biosecurity, water security, all that is going to play into our profession. And we need to be better about going to them with the DARPA-like model and eliciting funds from that side of the house too. So that's separated from small animal, large animal, but it's yet, it all is connected. Anything else?
I think we're out of time
Okay.
today, so